So you may be saying or thinking, Iago, you have been speaking for a while now and I still have not seen any code whatsoever. Is this really a programming course? And yes, it is. And now we are about to see our first Python code and our first real programming concept. And the first programming concept that we are going to be seeing is the concept of a variable. If you think about the word variable, you may think about mathematics and x and the variables that we have in equations. And programming variables are similar to those in the sense that they allow us to store data. X in an equation is a placeholder for some value that we will give it later, that will solve our problem or will hold some mathematical condition. In this sense, programming variables do the same. They are like a small container, a small little box that we will use to store data and to manipulate it, to change it later if we want. Okay. But inside of that box, I can put mostly whatever I want. So I might have a number 3, number 5, number 750, as we will see in a second. Or I might have a letter, A, B, C. I might even have a sequence of letters. So the word, I don't know, elephant. All of these different things that I can have inside of my variable are called data types. Okay? And that is what we will be seeing just in the following minutes. We will see how to define one variable in Python. We know what a variable is. We know that we will use it to store and manage data. And we will see how to tell Python that I want to have a variable, give it some value, because I said that I wanted to be able to give values to it and then read them later, modify them. And then I will be saying a little bit about the different data types that exist. So here we have our first definition of a variable. I always have the same syntax in Python. I have the variable name, the equal sign, and then the value that I want to give the variable. So this variable is going to be called ramen price, because I'm going to use it to store, you would never believe this, the price of ramen. Okay, and when I use the equal sign and give it a value 750, what I want this to mean is that the price of ramen that I'm storing is 750 yen in this case, which is what pretty decent ramen goes for around here these days. Okay, so at this point I have basically told Python, please go to memory, create a little box called that little box ramen price. So this every time I say ramen price, I mean that little box that you have just created, and then go there and put the number 750 inside of that box. Okay. Whenever I want to access that variable, I can just use the name that I have given it. Okay, so for example, let's suppose I want to compute the price of not 1 but 3 bowls of ramen. So I will create a new variable called 3 ramen price, and then I will make it by accessing the variable that I have just made and multiplying it times 3, because I wanted to know the price not of 1 but of 3 bowls of ramen. So this will create a new variable called now 3 ramen price somewhere else in memory, and it will put here 3 times what? Well, whatever is in the first variable that I made, in the ramen price variable. Not only that, here I'm also using, let's run the code, by the way. You can always run it just coming here and playing and pressing play, or pressing shift and enter, which is more convenient usually. Okay. In Google Colab you can also run cells by clicking in a play icon here and do the same thing with the control and enter. Okay. Here I'm going to use my first Python function. We will speak about functions later, but they allow me to work with variables, and I'm going to use a very special function that's called print, and what it does is unsurprisingly print things on the screen. So first I'm going to define my 3 ramen price variable, assign to it, put into it, assign to it the value of 3 times ramen price, the variable before, okay, and then print it on the screen. And here you can see that 3 times 750 is 2250, okay, which is a very simple example of how to use variables and how to use Python as a calculator. Most programming languages courses start here. Use your programming language as a calculator. Okay. Here I've been using an operator. More on them in a second. And most importantly, I have defined a couple of variables and used the print function to show some of them on the screen. Here I have been working with integer values. 750 is an integer number, and 3 times that is also an integer number. So these are all variables of integer data type. In many programming languages, I would need to explicitly say this is going to be an integer and use some word like int, for example, in the C programming language. In Python, I don't have to tell the language what type my variables are going to contain. Python will sort that out on its own time. It's very convenient, makes programming easier. Python is a very simple programming language to learn. Sometimes it's also a little bit dangerous if I lose track and start doing weird things and changing my variable types, which is allowed, but sometimes not very recommended. Okay. What other types do I have in Python apart from integer? Well, I can have real numbers in floating point representation, and I will refer to those mostly as float. I can have complex numbers too, and I can have, for example, character sequences, which are called strings. These 4 are the data types that are native to Python. To be frank, I'm not completely sure why complex numbers are here. I guess they are a natural extension of the real numbers. I don't think they are, well, I don't use them so much, but integer, floats, and strings, they are very, very, very widely used. In addition to these data types, Python also has some native data structures, not data types, but ways to store data. And we will be seeing a lot about this in the second course of this specialization. Lists, tuples, and dictionaries. Okay? I will not say much more about this, but I would like to give you the impression that Python comes with lots and lots and lots of interesting stuff already built in. And these are the very initial building blocks, but Python has many, many very advanced things built into it too. Okay, let's play around with some other variables. Okay, what do I have here? I said I could have integer variables. Let's make a couple, int var and another int var, and I assign 1 to the first one and -5 to the second one. I can also use float variables, real numbers. So I could use 1 to approximate Earth gravity or the moon, the gravity of the moon. Okay, so I would assign 9.80665 to one and 1.625 to the other. If you feel so inclined, you can Google what the precision of the float type in Python is, and you would know how many decimal places you can use for your scientific calculations, for example. As I was saying before, you can also define complex variables, -1 plus 5j or 2 minus 2j. Okay, not I but j is used in this here in this case. And I can also use strings. Can define a variable EUR which contains this sequence of characters. Sweet dreams are made of these. And another one which is called ifmix, which reads who am I to disagree. And I can then print them all with the same print function call, and I get all of the variables that I have mentioned before. So variables are the first programming concept that we are going to deal with, and they are basically little boxes where I can put data and then change it or read it, use it in operators. Okay, and we have seen some code on how to define a variable, how to put some data into it, and how to then use it with operators to modify it. We have seen that we can also always print it on the screen. And we have mentioned that the 4 basic data types in Python are integer, float, complex, and string, and given some examples on how to define variables of each type.